Hi, I'm Charles Evans, Music Director of the Long Bay Symphony here in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, with another installment of Speaking of the Arts. This is our first episode back after our first large ensemble performance since February of last year. So we were, of course, very excited to be on stage after such a long absence. But it got me to thinking a bit about the challenges of performing during this pandemic. So I thought it would give all of you out there some insight into the difficulties performers and teachers face during this COVID, to interview 3 musicians associated with the Long Bay Symphony. First, I'll speak with Chad Hammer, a member of our cello section, as well as orchestra director at Ten Oaks Middle School. Then with Lacey Tier, a senior at the Scholars Academy, as well as being principal bass in the Long Bay Youth Symphony. And finally with my choral colleague and frequent guest on this series, Dr. Tim Cook, music director of the Carolina Master Chorale and professor of choral studies at Coastal Carolina University. I hope you enjoy their perspectives on music in the COVID world. Hi, I'm here now with Chad Hammer at Ten Oaks Middle School, where he's been orchestra director for how many years now?
I'm in my 4th year here.
Okay.
Well, since we opened, so.
Yeah, and I think that you've been with the symphony for 5 years or so.
Yeah, I moved here in 2015.
Yeah.
The end of 2015.
Yeah. So just driving here,
yeah,
I could witness the growth and the tremendous amount of change in this area. Something that's always made it, so full of hope here.
Mm-hmm.
You realize that things aren't going to be the same at all 10 years from now. It's going to be a whole different place. And
Absolutely.
that's always very exciting. But, I think the schools have probably felt the impact of this COVID about as much as any
Definitely.
part of the, of society. So I thought it might be nice for you to walk our audience through everything you've been through from mid-March when this first happened up to now.
Okay, well, so yeah, mid-March last year, we started off with not really knowing what this was that was happening, but being ready. They said be ready to go into distance learning. And we didn't really know what that was going to look like, and then we were just we went into it. And it was scary because all of a sudden I'm teaching instrument playing over the computer.
Oh, I know.
And my older kids, my older students, they're more computer savvy, and so they adjusted to it far quicker than the 6th graders who were beginners anyway. So that was who it was hard.
And that's really hard to teach a beginner like that.
They had only had half of a year with me before really second semester had started, and they got thrown into learning how to play a violin or cello through a computer. So.
And that was all the way through the end of last year.
And that went through the end of the school year. Over the summer, we kept in contact, but I was hoping that we would start to see a waning and I could have some in-person summer tutoring sessions, but that obviously never happened. I was hopeful that a lot of students came and picked up their instruments to take home permanently for the summer, and that was good. And then we started the school year this year with 2 weeks of distance learning, or no, we started 2 weeks late, I'm sorry, and then we went into hybrid mode. And that has been a separate challenge because I see the students once a week here.
Yeah. And do you see them through the internet during the week, or you actually?
We do, and I offer my students the opportunity to tune in to the alternate days rehearsals as well, and they can rehearse with us from home if they choose to.
Now they don't actually sonically rehearse with you?
They mute themselves and they just basically listen along with what we're doing and then play with us when we're playing.
Yeah, because as I've mentioned to other people I've interviewed, the idea of syncing the sound is really, really difficult.
I tried that in the fall.
And we all tried it. Yeah.
Some high school groups had some success with doing it, but middle schoolers, it's a little too squirrely to get them to play, all on the same beat, like listening to a recording and playing with it.
Yeah.
So I just kind of gave up on trying to do that, and I actually end up doing a lot of one-on-one, stuff when it's online only, and just, working one at a time with them.
Yeah. Well, outside of the time limitation, what has been the biggest challenge in trying to work with your students to improve in these conditions?
I think just seeing them once a week, it's the consistency, because as you know, it's the daily repetition that really helps a beginner player especially learn their instrument. The plus side was getting 80-minute classes.
Well, that's true, because
So
then it's like a real regular rehearsal instead of a class.
Yeah, we get a lot done in the 80 minutes, but then I don't see them again for a week. So we do some limited work on Fridays during our Google Meets where everybody is distance learning. They've picked up how to tune their instruments on their own a lot better.
Yeah, so they've sort of been forced into a certain degree of independence.
Mhm.
Yeah.
The other challenge was how to present it, like how to present the product as a concert.
Yeah, I was about to ask you about that. So what have you done about performance of any kind since this whole thing started?
Well, the district made it clear that if we were going to try to do it, that we needed to follow a lot of strict guidelines, and so they came up with a proposal document that we have to fill out outlining all of our safety protocols that we follow. So a lot of teachers decided at that point to go the digital route and create the grid videos like you see, which, like I said, high schoolers tend to have more success at than middle schoolers. So we put together our proposal, myself and the band director here and the chorus director, and we broke up our concert into 2 shows on a Saturday, and so that we would have a maximum number of the audience. I think it was around 100 people, and we did it in the gymnasium instead of on the stage in our auditorium area. So we did that. The kids were able to be physically 6 feet apart out on the gym floor, and we just made the best of it. I did pick slightly easier music since we only see each other once a week.
Right, sure.
But we were able to still put together a nice program with some holiday music, and the parents were, I think, very appreciative to have that semblance of normalcy, to be able to come and see their child perform in person.
Yes, I think that's what we're all just clamoring for. I think you witnessed that with any of the few gigs you've actually been able to do. People are so starved for live performance. So I think that's a real plus. I think it's made people appreciate things all the more and to remain hungry for them when they return. So how does it look like things are evolving at this point? Like when do you... We just talked about there being plexiglass of some kind installed in here, as it is in the classrooms.
Our classrooms just received them this week, the plexiglass barriers, and we're going to configure them in this room that'll work with the space needs that a kid needs to be able to play their instrument. But fortunately, this room has enough space to where we can use the barriers and still have bowing room to move around.
Yeah, that's the tough thing about strings. You put barriers between players. It's one thing to do that between clarinets, but cello,
right,
and
bass.
Yeah, bass especially. I mean, you really need a lot of room to start with. So, well, yeah, and of course there is some hope and promise, I think, by the school district that, the goal at least, let's say, be back to 5-day a week before the end of the school year.
And that's kind of a double-edged situation because that was the other challenge we faced is since I only see half the kids once and then half the kids on the alternate day, the first time they played together before our concert was the day of the concert at a dress rehearsal. But if we do 5 days a week face-to-face with all the students here, we don't know if we'll fit in this room with barriers and spacing. So we'll just have to see how that happens. But I always try to find the plus side. That means I'll see them twice a week for 80 minutes. Because we'll stick to the alternating day schedule, but just all the students in the building. So that'll be a bonus. Some other things I'm hopeful about is it looks like we might be able to have our region orchestra event that the kids were able to audition for by video. And then we're planning the all-county event and hopeful that will be able to happen in April. So we're creeping our way back to normal life.
Right. Now, the all-county had usually been in January. Right.
Yeah, normally we would have had that by now. We would have had the region event by now. It actually happens in November. So.
So, well, I'm sure that, all the teaching strategies have been most on your mind with regard to this. But just like I was referencing some gigs that, and I know that you've been involved in a few symphony things that we've put together, but I'm sure you've done a few others. But as far as weddings and things like that, that's way down to start. And of course, now that we've entered into the winter, all those outdoor options have kind of dried up.
The summer was a quiet time, which is
that's
normally
for sure.
A busy time for weddings. But I have played, I think, 3 weddings since last March total. And that was a nice experience. 2 of them were outdoors, and then one was in First Presbyterian Church. with just like 10 members of the family there, but
Yeah.
it was nice.
Well, as you know from our performing there on our series, it had been open for a
Yeah.
while, and then, once they got a scare, they have to do what they have to do, and because that's very dangerous for any given congregation to take
Right.
that risk. So, I think we share the optimism about, youth strings and orchestra, and that, you're also the director of the Long Bay Youth Symphony String Ensemble.
Right.
So I know you're equally happy with the fact that we committed to doing performances in the fall, or starting rehearsals in the fall and getting
Right.
started. You had your first one on January 23rd, right?
Yes, that sounds
Yeah,
right.
whatever that, yeah. That
24th,
weekend.
I believe.
24th was
Sunday.
the Sunday, yeah. But it was a wonderful concert. It was made perhaps a little shorter than normal, but just the idea that we're out there doing it. And I don't know how you feel about it, but from our perspective with the Youth Symphony, I think students are just really eager to be a part of something.
Oh, yeah.
So it's nice for them to have an outlet, outside of school.
Absolutely, yeah.
So,
Because I'm in a very fortunate situation here, but not every school is able to have live instrumental classes. Some schools are just teaching general music class to class.
yeah.
So I do feel fortunate here to be able to still offer that to the students.
Well, what about your private teaching? Because I know you have a number of students. I mean,
do.
most of the Youth Symphony students I've gotten in cello are students of yours.
They've been doing well. We've been fortunate enough to continue that throughout this whole time. I think we took a couple months off in the summer when it was kind of at its height and everybody was just a little nervous to see what that was like. And I do a lot of driving. I go to a lot of houses because I do live in North Carolina, so I don't expect my students to drive to me all the time. Sometimes they
But you
come.
are seeing them in person.
I am.
Were you doing a lot of the, Zoom call lessons?
I
and that kind of
mainly
thing?
actually did when I was teaching at Coastal. There was one cello student there, and we had to be teaching by Zoom
Right, yeah,
last
they
year.
kind of mandate that.
But my other private students, I said, do you want Zoom lessons? And they said, we just, we get enough of that with this distance learning with school. We'd rather just wait until we can do it in person.
Yeah.
And I didn't enjoy teaching it that way because it's just so hard to really hear the tone. First of all, you just can't really hear if
Yeah.
the tone you're hearing is the instrument or if it's the equipment that
Yeah.
like it's recording on. So.
Yeah. Well, we still have many challenges ahead of us as far as this is concerned, but I think it's interesting to see what everyone has done in various situations and what the schools have done. And, nobody knows for sure. I mean, there's a lot of optimism and there are lots of recommendations. I guess I can't remember, in the new administration, some official was talking, again, endorsing the idea that students back in school,
Yeah.
it seems to be, the evidence seems to support that works out.
I think so. I hope so.
The teachers are another matter.
Right. I would love it if the teachers were, not to get political, but if the teachers were kind of moved to the front of the vaccine line. That would make me feel a lot
Well, that was
better.
just, I heard that on the news just today.
Yeah.
I mean, they were debating in the state, whether to prioritize teachers and
Right.
put them ahead. And yeah, I can't remember who was speaking, but while they regret the idea of denying, inevitably you're going to have to deny others if you're moving
Right.
people up, to deny seniors the opportunity when they've been waiting for so long. But this particular official was saying that can we try to end the school year with this positive note and perhaps pick up to 5 days a week and get us back to normal. So I know there's been a real push to that, but in the meantime we just have to kind of try and improvise and do what we can. And I think there, like you said, I mean, we all look for the silver linings, and I think there have been some positives. I did want to ask you, you've hardly had the opportunity with 1 day a week though, but have you had the chance to have the students do chamber music? Is that a strategy you thought of?
Yeah, definitely.
To isolate them in trios or whatever?
We definitely did that. We kind of had to just because of the instrumentation we had with the splitting of the students by A days and B days.
Yeah.
I had some classes that didn't even have all of the instrumentation for just a regular string orchestra piece. So We've done some quartets. We've just organized some trios sometimes, and we're heading into the spring, which is normally solo and ensemble season, which is another opportunity to set up those smaller groups. I think that event is still going to be recorded this year, so all the submissions are going to be recorded and submitted for ratings that way.
Well, again, we do what we can, and it will, with patience on everyone's part, we'll get back to normal. But it's intriguing to hear all the things you've done, and we'll hopefully be able to check in later and see that everything is kind of back to normal after surprisingly long. None of us thought this was going to be like this,
right?
But that's the way it is. But anyway, it's been interesting hearing your perspectives and your experiences with this. Mm-hmm. And we will sign off for now, and then join me. We'll be right back with a couple of other interviews. Hi, I'm here now with Lacey Tier, one of the Youth Symphony bass players. We're here at the end of Youth Symphony rehearsal, and I thought I would snag her to give her perspective. Now you are at Scholars Academy,
yes,
right,
sir.
as well. So she's been a bass player with us for 3 years?
Freshman year, yep.
Yeah. And she's particularly, her situation is particularly intriguing to me because she is a senior and she is looking to go to music school. And so I wanted to talk to Lacey about all of the complications that COVID has presented for a student in music and one trying to move on in the music world. So Lacey, let me ask you, what is the major impediment or hardship that COVID has put on you?
Well, I feel like as it goes with day-to-day life, not related to audition things with college, I feel that most people can relate. There is a universal understanding of a lot of the hardship that people have gone through. We're all
Right.
isolated, we're apart from each other, everything's virtual. And as it relates to music, and then with school being virtual, that was a really hard transition for a lot of people.
It's hard for everybody. It's hard for my kids.
Right.
It's just...
And I think that a lot of people who have kids or are, teenagers or in any level of school understand how hard that transition was and how hard it is to stay focused and motivated at home. And then when you take out music and you take out rehearsals, I think that I speak for any musician at any level when I say that this is an outlet where people can express themselves and express their passion and not have to worry about everything else that's going on outside.
Right. So am I mistaken? Is this the only outlet you currently have?
No, not just like the Youth Symphony. I'm saying, but just in ensembles in general.
Right. But so
yes.
what ensemble activity do you still have now with the current conditions?
Right. So I'm here with the
Right.
Long Bay Youth Symphony, and then I also play in the wind ensemble at Coastal Carolina, as far as ensembles go.
Now they're just though starting back up, right?
Yes,
Because
yes.
in the fall semester they weren't doing anything, were they?
We had a fall semester where we did some chamber things.
Performances,
yes,
though?
Yes, we had a
Oh, okay.
recording kind of thing where we had smaller chamber groups, but and now we're starting back up actually this week with regular rehearsals, which
Right,
is
in the
been
spring
great.
semester, that's really good. But now, as far as the now your home school is St. James.
Yes.
Yeah, and what's going on in the regular schools?
Right. So in regular schools, people, I think we're now familiar with the words hybrid and virtual and
Oh,
all of those
boy,
things. But I'm doing hybrid. I know at regular schools they're doing that decision either between virtual or hybrid. But it's without this outlet of during really the thick of quarantine and that spring of 2020 was just really difficult to not have this outlet in this way that a lot of people cope with how everything else is going and with how crazy things were on the outside, and then to not have that music was really, really difficult. I know for me, a lot of people handled quarantine great and got a lot of things done, and
Yeah, I'm not one of those people.
that was not me either. So I think that I speak for everyone in almost every walk of life when I say that I really appreciate and have so much more gratitude for all the things that I get to do now, and I will be able to resume going forward.
Right. I felt that this entire year with the Youth Symphony students, is the idea that we're actually proceeding and doing this and actually doing concerts. I mean, the symphony itself, just did their first concert recently, and so we weren't doing anything until the end of January, so it was almost an entire year off. But fortunately, it seems a little bit less risk for younger people and students, and since the schools were operating to a certain degree, we thought we'd give it a try, and I think it's really been a godsend for a lot of students to be able to still have that opportunity. But yeah, so it is a silver lining that you learn to appreciate what you have not been able to do. And I think the silver lining for us, and I think you would probably agree, is that in order to fashion something that is safe and workable, we have done a lot more chamber music. And
It's
that's
true.
been particularly fun for you.
That's been a lot of fun for me.
Yeah.
I really enjoy being able to do chamber music, which is seldom, it's a seldom opportunity for bass players,
Right.
but it's definitely been fun.
Yeah, so we're trying to work in two of the great standards of one of the Rossini string sonatas, and then also the Dvorak quintet with bass. So yeah, that's really turned out to be a real plus, I think. Something we always wanted to do. But we're just somehow too busy getting the regular agenda going that when you have no choice, you pursue
Right.
something like this. But yeah, I wanted to ask you about particularly applying for college, because I just can't imagine. I made all my visits when I was a senior, and it meant so much to me to be in those places where I could kind of see the atmosphere of being in the conservatory, and it's like, yeah, this is the place I want to go. But how has that worked for you?
Right, so fortunately, the schools that I've applied to, I've been either on their campus or I have been to events that are at these schools, which has definitely guided me in my decision process. But all of that took place before COVID. I was fortunate enough.
Oh wow! So
to-
that is
yes.
good that you kind of did it well in advance.
Definitely.
So-
Well, actually, there's one exception to that. I visited Vanderbilt University during this COVID season and had to quarantine for the weeks after and before that I traveled there. But specifically when it comes to applying and that whole process of recording and auditioning, I had this picture in my head that I had painted even a year ago, or just the years leading up to the last that we just experienced, that when I watched my other friends go through this really stressful process, and I said, well, this is what this looks like. I'm going to go to all these places, I have to travel, and I have to stay there, and I'm going to go to the campus, and I will go into the music school, and I will see the professor, and
Yeah.
oh my goodness,
Yeah.
which is that kind of stress that builds, and you know what you expect, you know
Yeah.
what you're doing. But now I have these Zoom auditions where it's thinly veiled in comfort. It's something that I've grown so used to, is clicking join Zoom.
Yeah. It's still not the same thing. I
No.
find that empty reality a little intimidating. I still do.
Definitely.
I'd rather have the response of people's faces and so on. So it's very hard to just stare into an open chasm of an auditorium or in a church where we've done these performances and just talk as though they're there. It's kind of strange. But how about your lessons?
Yes.
Because that's also a challenge.
Mhm. Yeah, lessons leading up to kind of during the summertime and on the tail end of springtime and a little into the fall, I was doing all virtually, which was very difficult. Bass is a very physical instrument. It's one of those things where being in person is super, super critical. Fortunately, I've been able to resume taking in-person lessons with my private teacher with masks and social distancing and all of those things. But during that time when we were doing those Zoom auditions, it was very difficult because, well, you can't show me this thing and you can't really see what I'm doing.
And you can't play together. That's the most
Exactly.
disconcerting thing about it. You have
Yes.
to take your turns because the visual doesn't line up with the audio. So it's kind of tough.
Yes, definitely.
Well, it's certainly been a challenge, but I think we, like you had alluded to early on in this conversation, we learned to appreciate things that we maybe took for granted before. And so the idea that we can be together every week and rehearse and perform actually more concerts than we did under regular circumstances, because for the youth symphony, we've separated the chamber music out, or we did. So there's been a real substantial amount of activity, and I think it's been something that has been really helpful to a lot of people. So
Definitely.
but it's good to have a chance to talk to you, and we wish you luck in your college endeavors, and hopefully when you are off to college by the fall, things will have lifted somewhat and we can get back to some kind of normal.
Yes, I hope so. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. Well, stay tuned. I will have some other interviews coming up. Hi, now I'm back home and joined, as many times before, by my friend and colleague, Tim Cook, who, as many of you out there know, is the director of the Carolina Master Chorale, as well as being the director of the adult choir at First Presbyterian Church, and also on the faculty at Coastal Carolina University, both doing the choirs there and teaching private voice. So Tim, nice to have you back in my home.
Good to be here, Charles, as always. Yep.
So our subject for this episode is just COVID and how that has affected musicians' activities. So I mean, I think of all of the areas of the performing arts, vocal performance has probably been the most affected.
When the pandemic started, I was terrified about what my life would be like, and so I can say at least it hasn't been a worst case scenario.
Right.
But our activity now is nowhere close to what we do. The circumstances won't allow us to put forth everything that we could offer. Some people won't participate at all, and I can't blame them. And if I weren't the conductor, who felt responsible for keeping organizations afloat, keeping everything moving, I might think about not participating for a while. But since this is my lifeblood, this is what I do, and this is what you do, we can just keep moving forward. But
the thing I've found too with musicians, and you probably have as well, is that people have just kind of gotten worn down with it. Yeah. The acuteness of the concern is not there anymore. I'm not saying the concern's not there, but people have walked this pathway for a year now, and almost a year, and while they're worried about it, they just want to do something, and right. I think that's really important. And I was talking with you earlier about this, the fact that the big thing when all of this happened back in the spring was to do these virtual performances. That was a big goal, just to get out there on the internet, on YouTube and whatnot, just to do some kind of something. And I think we all realized, maybe with the hope that some sort of performance can be pursued, and normal is right around the corner. I think we hope that we wouldn't have to mess with the complexity of that, because you did that with a bunch of singers at Coastal.
Yeah, we did, and it's very intensive, time intensive, and each participant has to reach an exact standard, and then you have to find somebody with the capability for the technology to put it all together, and that person also has to be artistic because they have to hear the music the same way that you hear it.
Right. You were fortunate to have Ethan do that.
I actually had the same project done by two different people because there was a student who wanted that opportunity, a graduate student, and then I had an undergraduate and a graduate student. And the one that the undergraduate turned out was really quite extraordinary, and it had some little problems in it. And so I would call him and say, "This isn't quite right," and he'd 15 minutes later he'd send it back. He said, "How's it now?" And it'd be fixed. The other one, the voices weren't together.
It's tough.
It made all kinds. Yeah. So I mean, it takes a special person to put it together, and it can be expensive too. Unless you have a volunteer, and if you have a volunteer,
right.
My volunteer said it took him 80 hours.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just for one thing. So it was all the rage. I mean, all the major orchestras were putting out performances like that. But I think we just reached the point where we're just trying to do what we can, and do outdoor performances, do small group performances, and of course, both of our organizations have recently done, fairly substantial. You had 25 members.
Right.
We had 15
Yeah.
for our first concert back on the 31st of January. But both of those performances were live streamed. And so
Right.
that's become the new
Right.
hopeful
Yeah.
medium.
Right, and I hope that we can continue to connect to the audience. I was sort of surprised at how well ours went. Of course, we were preparing for a live performance.
Yeah.
We had 200 audience members that were going to come. Our concert was sold out. The hall holds 900, so
Right, but they would only allow 200 at First Presbyterian.
Yeah, and then a little more than a week before our concert, the church made the decision to have no more public events because the numbers were going up between Thanksgiving and Christmas. And I didn't begrudge the church that at all. I thought, well, that's the right decision. We just have to figure out what to do. And the church said, however, we will allow you to put the performance on and allow you to use our technology so you can stream it. And I was quite surprised about about the reaction. I only heard one negative reaction, and that was before the performance, and I didn't hear from that person again afterward. I had a good conversation with that person. And but all of the email that I got afterward, was deeply appreciative for something.
That's the thing. I mean, people just want something, and while it's not sitting there watching this live. It's awfully close. It is live.
Right.
You're just not in the presence of the ensemble. So
and with the camera angles and so forth, I mean, you can get up closer and certain things that you can't see.
Well, that's the thing. I think there's an added plus and there's a silver lining, like we've talked about before, to this so much. And I think there are two things that came to mind when we did our concert. Was that number one, people could gather together and have a nice sort of social event. Families or people who've been close and they don't have any hesitation about getting together in a home can get wine and cheese and watch a concert and enjoy it that way. And then as an extension of that, the idea that there are actually people all over the world who can just get a ticket and watch, and that's never been possible.
That's true, yeah.
And I hope that means that some level of this will continue, and I'm pretty confident it will, well past the pandemic.
Right, sure. We're learning how to communicate with audiences. Our snowbirds who can't be there,
Right.
who love to see the choir in February, but in December, they could sit in their home in upstate New York and feel like they were part of it.
Yeah. So, how are rehearsals for that? For both choir, all three choirs actually. I mean, for Coastal.
Sure.
And Zumwalt.
So they're all a little bit different, but the First Presbyterian choir on a given Sunday morning will be up to 15 singers, and that feels, like pretty full group. We're able to spread them out quite a bit, and we wear these lovely singers masks.
Yeah, I love these. Yeah,
and these masks that give you, room to breathe, and that are such a great fashion statement.
they remind me of those Venetian masks, the doctor masks.
Right, exactly. But then we also put singers on microphones, which they're not so accustomed to in choral settings, so that all the sound can be synthesized to go out on a broadcast. So we rehearse on Sunday mornings in that big sanctuary. We've got 15 singers, so we can spread them out all over. But a problem with singers is that they love to have somebody sitting next to them that's confident with the music. Mm-hmm. Singers like to lean on each other a little bit.
Yeah, that's what that dynamic has changed.
They miss that, and if you're a little bit insecure about this or that, and you don't have anybody nearby, that aspect of it makes it a little more difficult. The concert choir at Coastal rehearses much the same way in Wheelwright Auditorium, so it seats whatever, 800 or something, but they sit in the audience.
And that's hard to hear in those seats. It's very hard to pick up sound from others near you.
So I've got maybe 30 to 35 that come. Our choir is 55 typically, and so this, COVID has, reduced our membership, and then also a number of students elect not to come live. They're allowed by the university to take any class online right now, and so we have students that watch choir online. I can't imagine that that's a real choral experience for them, but that's their choice.
And they wouldn't ultimately show up for the performance.
Some will,
maybe as things shift, you get more confidence.
Some will, if I can, put them on the end, or a couple of them will, but some of them just won't participate at all, and that's their prerogative. And
But do all three choirs use these?
They
masks?
all use these masks, yeah.
In performance,
in performance, yeah. And you know, you think they're going to really impede the diction and so forth. It's not terrible, and especially
It's really not.
with the miking. You
Yeah.
know, I was surprised at how many people told me that they couldn't believe they understood all the
Oh,
words.
I watched it and listened
yeah.
to it, and it was amazing.
Yeah.
Of course, we talked about the fact that Jody Boykin over there does such a great job at First Presbyterian.
Right, sound man is very good. He just wants it to be, and he wants it to be better and better every time.
Right, and the thing about that, you know, contrasting your performance with the symphony's performance is that, you know, he was able to attack our situation completely differently. He just put microphones behind me, and it was an acoustic experience.
Right.
You know, and his goal was
That's
like
nice.
he wanted to just get the idea of what it'd be like to sit near the front in the audience. So he just had a pair of, actually 3 mics. He had a pair of one kind of mic and then one above that.
Yeah.
And by all accounts, I haven't heard it yet, but
Yeah,
everyone
I
says
heard
it sounds
Yeah, it does,
fantastic.
yeah. Mhm.
So, you know, there is that. It's always fun to get new benefits from something different, and like I say, we'll hold on to those, I think, as we move forward. But I was curious about private teaching too, because
Yeah.
I don't do that. But
Yeah. Well, the university, you know, has, you know, very clear rules, and indoor singing in offices is not allowed. They've allowed us one space, and that's Wheelwright Auditorium, but the auditorium has a lot of demands on the schedule, so you can't do private lessons there. So our lessons are in studios. I meet my students for the first couple of lessons, so we choose their repertoire.
and just talk through.
Yeah, talk through them, help them with any foreign languages, and
Yeah.
then we might, the pianist will come and record an accompaniment that they can use in their practice, and then I have 4 lessons this afternoon. I'm going home, I'm going to sit in front of my computer, and that's the only way I can get them to sing. You know, they'll go to a practice room, and I'll send them a Zoom link, and they'll sing for me over the internet.
Yeah, I don't think most people have a clear idea of how much more work it's been for us in the performing arts just to make something happen. I spoke to someone a while back who was the director of a theater, you know, spoken theater, and they were trying to do all these online performances, and just the idea, or virtual really, everyone was in their own, it's like, that's unbelievable to consider the amount of timing
Well,
involved.
our friends at the Theater of the Public have been dealing with that, you know, and they did try to do a live show, you know, sort of early on in this process. I couldn't remember exactly what month, maybe it was August or September, but they spread COVID through the cast.
Oh,
you know.
gosh.
Yeah,
I
the
had not heard
yeah,
that.
the director got it. A number of the actors. I mean, they've all come back. I know them all, and you know, and they've all survived it. But
It's pernicious.
but
It's
but it's
amazing.
yeah, but it's changed. You know, their thinking about how they can do things. You know.
Well, what's up for, say, the rest of the season for the Master Chorale?
Well, we've canceled our February concert. It feels like it's worse than it was in November.
Yeah, well, we are definitely. It's the irony of it is we were all, you know, on pins and needles when it first came out in March,
Right.
and we were, you know, just
Right.
obsessive about everything. And now we've almost a year later kind of got worn down. And ironically, this is the worst. This is the peak for
Yeah,
us.
well, I mean, you know, when you know people like, you know, our former mayor, John Rose,
Right,
you know,
I know,
you know,
yeah.
got COVID and died. And
we've talked about several musicians in the area. who-
yeah, so what if that
just-
happened within your ensemble? You know, how do you live with
Yeah,
yourself after
yeah,
that?
yeah,
You know?
by making a
Right.
very small, poor choice. you know.
Right. So I'm hopeful. You know, I'm hopeful about the vaccines. You know, and a number of our members are starting to get them. I've gotten my first shot, and you know, I'm hopeful that would make it safer, and we'll just have to push forward. So. I hope we have a March concert that we have not yet canceled, and we have a May concert, you know, with players from the Symphony, and so I'm hopeful that maybe we'll be able to pull those off in some form or another, probably virtually, but you know, maybe we might be able to get a small audience, you know, by May. Who knows? Who
Yeah,
knows?
that would be nice. Well, we're forging ahead. We had you know, a good artistic success, I think, with our first of this series in the spring of 2021, and I think it's just a question of getting people accustomed to a new style of performance viewing, and I think there were some people who called up asking for tickets, and when they found out it was virtual, they just didn't.
Sure.
And I just think, well, you should try it, because I think it's going to really become, in some part, what we're going to be facing maybe intermittently over the next 20 years or whatever. Who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows?
Who knows?
These variants may...
The variants,
Yeah.
and there could be another pandemic. So I mean,
Yeah. But at any rate, we're forging ahead with, a series of 3 more concerts, but I think another one we've talked about earlier today, you and I, is the hope that we'll be finally presenting our Queen concert as an outdoor performance at the baseball stadium. So, and we'll have some chorus members singing as well. So we're hoping that by that time, and certainly in an outdoor venue, things will have smoothed out a bit, but it's going to take some time. But we all look forward to getting back to some level of normal, that's for sure. It's like I referenced, it's a tremendous challenge to try to move forward with anything, because there's so much, just in terms of double checking when we did our performance, this first one, we had to restate our COVID protocols and make sure we had everything, all the sanitizing there available, and made sure about the length of rehearsal time, just to make sure that there's no chance of the particulates spreading and kind of reaching a certain mass. It just all seems so mysterious, and all we can do is follow recommendations of the CDC.
Right.
So, but we will move through it, and I think that the upshot of it is that people are going to be starved to get out and do these kinds of things again. So we all look forward to when things pick up, but in the meantime, we innovate as best we can. So Tim, I appreciate your coming out again and talking to me, and
Thanks for the
best of
invitation.
luck with all your organizations, and hopefully we will be able to collaborate as often as we have been in the past.
I hope so too.
All right,
Thanks.
thank you so much.
Thank you, Charles.
Well, I hope you found my guests' perspectives enlightening and helped you better to understand what they've had to do to remain musically active during this pandemic. I want to remind everyone about our next Long Bay Symphony concert, Going for Baroque, on Sunday, February 21st at 4 o'clock. It's an all-Baroque program with familiar pieces as well as some not so familiar. So in addition to the first suite from Handel's famous Water Music and Bach's C major orchestral suite, we have 2 of our Long Bay Symphony principal players doing concertos by Vivaldi. First, our principal second, Abigail Alba, will perform the famous Spring from the Four Seasons, and our principal bassoon, Patrick Herring, will perform the bassoon concerto in G minor. So like the last concert, this one also is only live streamed. So for a ticket code to have access to the live stream, either visit our website, very simple to remember, longbaysymphony.com, or you can go on the Long Bay Symphony's Facebook page. Until then, stay safe and keep listening.